You're listening to PatchBay on tymkrs.
Welcome to PatchBay, show where we like to talk about basically the stuff that we've learned over the years on how to get audio from the real world into a recorded format that we can sort of, hand out, sometimes for money. What do you think, Shane? Money?
Sometimes for money, although it tends to be the case that people don't so much hand it for money nowadays. Here, take the 3 downloads and hopefully come to my show.
They may not be selling their songs, but they're definitely buying time in the studio. So, the music industry may have changed a lot on the musician side of things, but on our side of things, I think we're talented people who get paid for applying our talent to particular problems, and I think
we're still part of the equation.
Yeah. I think we're in a better position than a lot of the musicians are at this point, because we still get paid whether or not they sell their stuff.
This is true. I've always had the conversation with my boss about pretty much every single session I've ever done. I've always had a repeat customer, whether it was once, twice, a whole album, or whatever. I've always done more than one session with anybody who's ever walked in. And obviously I'm giving them a good time, or they're getting what they're looking for. But the free music myth is, as far as bands are concerned, is a very scary thing. Because, as they say nowadays, music doesn't really have any value anymore. And that's scary from an engineer standpoint, as well as a hugely scary for a musician standpoint. The thing is, people like Radiohead can, put an album up and say, pay us what you think it's worth. But that's Radiohead. If you're an unknown band and you put your album up and say, pay you what you think it's worth, you're not going to make any money. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I put up our music on SoundCloud, and people can listen to it all day long if they want to, but they can also buy it if they want to, and some people do, which is nice.
That is? Oh, really? Wow. Well, that's good to know, actually. I've been trying to talk my band into doing stuff like that, but they tend to want to have the most... It helps having the engineer in a band, but they want to have the most polished, Britney Spears version of the stuff, which is fine. You always want to put your best foot forward, but I kind of like the idea of getting it out there and getting people to hear it, too.
Yeah,
so.
I like doing the exact opposite of the polished thing. I like to sit down, knock it out, put it together, get it so that the mix is good. It doesn't have to be perfect, but nothing annoying in there, right? Just get it to the point where it's no longer annoying, and just let the performance do the talking instead of the engineering. But I don't know. I guess I'm a little different that way.
Well, I guess part of it is 9 times out of 10, I would sooner do stuff that way when I could, but I always have to, when I start a session, I always have to be under the assumption that it's going to be the polished version of stuff. So I set it up like that, because until I talk to the band, and a lot of times I don't get any kind of pre-production meeting, I don't really know what they're going for until I get them in the room and start setting it up. And I don't really know what the consequences of my setup are until we start doing overdubs, and I've recorded live off the floor and there's a ton of bleed, and the guy's like, oh, I wanted to redo my guitar, and I'm like, well, we're going to redo the whole thing because the guitar is bleeding into everything, so normally I try to shoot for, I can always make it more lo-fi sounding or more live sounding, but to a degree, I guess, but it would be nice for me if I didn't always have to set it up so that it had to be polished. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but you're working for them, so yeah.
Yeah, that's whoever's paying the bill.
You've kind of got to give them the best thing that you can. It's a lot easier to make it sound more lo-fi than it is to try to fix lo-fi and make it sound nice and clean. So recording clean is always a good plan in your situation. Thankfully, I don't record bands like that, so I don't have to worry about that. I can be the creative director as well as the engineer, which is always nice.
Right. What I was gonna say too, like when I've done demos for my band and stuff in the basement, like a lot of times I do the whoever's loudest wins demo. As far as the mix is concerned, and I mean, like the levels get set, there's some engineering going on, but I'm also playing guitar at the same time too, and I actually quite like the quality of that kind of stuff. And when people don't know that the record light's on, um, people either clam up or they play really well when they know the record light's on. So my band tends to play really well when they don't know that it's on.
So I was
Which
listening to your SoundCloud account this week, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and what's the username on there for you?
It's Shane Ward _1, I believe. But let's keep talking and I'll double check.
Okay. So I was listening to that, and I'm assuming that was a bit of your band on there and a bit of just you messing around.
I think 9, actually, most of it is me messing around, whether it was loops or that kind of thing. Was there any standout sort of songs that you were listening to, or I think most of it was just me, actually.
Yeah, I just sort of went through there just to sort of get a feel for it. It didn't seem like it was like there was a lot of songs on there, like fully produced, all that sort of thing. Mostly just sort
So,
of guitar. Yeah.
yeah, there was definitely no vocals. I'm the no vocals forever guy. There is one that was kind of fun on there. That was that Muddy Waters tune that I had on there. It was called Shane Solo or something like that. I'm the second 8. Yeah, it's I'm just checking here now. It's Shane Ward _1. Shane Ward -1. That's what it is. There's a big picture of Marvin. Yeah, just going through it. It's all stuff that I've done. That Back to the Basics remix was a hip hop remix I did with a bunch of loops and vocals that I recorded for another tune. Yeah, all of it's me except for Love Is Like Tequila, which is a friend of mine. Anyway.
Yeah. So, if you want to check out some of the stuff that Shane just does in his free time for fun, you can go take a look at his SoundCloud account too.
Those are that's my lunch hour time. Usually when I get a second with Pro Tools and I've got a half an hour lunch break, it's sandwich in one hand and trying to play guitar with one hand. But that's usually what I tend to do if I have a guitar work, is put some loops together. I've got a fun couple of loop station type drumming programs for Pro Tools that give you sort of a straight 8 or that kind of thing, and you usually come up with fun stuff with that. Actually, I don't know if you do that, but I tend to try and create guitar stuff at weird tempos, like not only time signatures, but just try to play slower, try to play faster, just to push myself, rather than getting stuck in the moderate rock, 120 to 140 kind of thing.
Yeah, I totally flee from any of the rules, right? I try to get as far away from the rules as I can. Just because that's where the art happens, right? And I'm not an artsy fartsy type, but when it comes to music, I kind of think that it's better if it's yours and not just trying to be like all the other crap that's out there already.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with you. My only issue musically musically for me is that whether I want it to be or not, there's usually some kind of Smashing Pumpkins or blues in there. Although when I do play blues, I have sort of iterations of different guys. It's not just SRV type blues or whatever, but yeah, instrumentally anyway, if it's a rock song, it tends to have some kind of a Pumpkins feel to it, and that's just because it's born into my brain at this point. But yeah, no, it's nice to not have any rules, and I quite like having, changing the tempo up and trying to come up with some different ideas based on different grooves and stuff like that. I'll find a loop online on a hip hop beat or something and loop that and see if I can come up with something just as an exercise.
Recording has sort of been a double-edged sword for music in general. while it allows people with the ability to share their music with a much, much larger audience than they would have been able to before recording was possible, it has also sort of had the adverse effect of making it so that not nearly as many people actually live their lives making music. There's this sort of tendency now to, if you're going to be making music, you have to record it and you have to be wanting to go somewhere with it. You have to be wanting to publish it or make it big or something like that. But before guys like us showed up with our tricky toys and all of our cool gadgets, people would just hang out in the living room or on the porch, play and sing together. And I think that is a really, really kind of sad that most people have lost that. And when I'm making music, I kind of like to keep it in mind that it's, even if I'm going to put it up and publish it, it should always sort of be about that fun, creative sharing process between people. Because I think that's what really is at the core of why we like music, because it's sort of a shared experience.
Well, I've been fortunate enough to go and see a lot of like panels and things like this, and one of the most entertaining and interesting, eye-opening ones I saw was by the former manager of Pink Floyd, and I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but I'm sure if you Google former manager of Pink Floyd, you can find it. I saw him do a keynote once. He was talking about how before, if you wanted to hear music, you had to go out and find it. This is before there was recording. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so once recording became a thing, it bred a whole industry behind recording, and you have to find a band, and you would have to find a studio, and then after you spent all the hours in the studio, then you would have to find a store, like an actual store with bricks to be able to sell it. And he was talking about how the internet's changed a lot of that, and you've gotten to the point now where you can cut out the recording studio, you can cut out the label, you can cut out even the store. You can just put it up and go, here, world, take this, and make the consumer pay for the medium if they want to put it on their USB stick or buy a CD and burn it. And I've always sort of used the term the land of a million bands kind of thing. And for me, doing a little bit of A&R, I always sort of say, like, what separates you from the pack? Like, what's going to be, and like that's really a music business kind of thing. Like, getting back to the sort of porch kind of music and stuff. It's really about how music was originally, what music originally was. Music was for occasions and for parties or socials or friends gathered together. And it was only once somebody went, hey, I can make money at this, that it, sort of became what it was. And there's a whole grassroots movement of people who are trying to get it back to what you were talking about, right?
Yeah, and we totally live that here. I don't think we're part of any movement. I know there's a movement out there, but if you're gonna have a home, it had better have a piano in it and guitars
Agreed.
laying all over the place, and it used to be an everyday part of everyone's lives over here in North America, and it would be a great, great thing if that became the case again.
Well, a lot of artists now are doing the house concert thing, and have you heard of that?
Oh yeah, I've been to a
Do
few
that
house shows, yeah.
And I really like that idea because it is getting back to more of the grassroots kind of thing, and being able to. I've always enjoyed being able to meet musicians when they're not playing, after the show, before the show, like whether it was a big artist or, if I go to a club and I see a band play, I get to hang out with them after the fact. And in a setting like that where it's intimate, like, you may not be the hugest fan of their music or whatever, but I always found, it's nice to have that connection, because a lot of times when you listen to music as a listener, not as an engineer, but if you're just listening to stuff, you don't listen to Britney Spears and go, man, I totally feel what that guy was feeling when he was laying down that synth loop, or like you don't listen to it. You don't listen to music nowadays and go, I can hear people playing in a room. I can't hear people playing that one saxophone line or that one. Whereas if you listen to, Tennessee Williams or not Tennessee Williams, but Robert Johnson or Nat King Cole, you can hear guys in a room playing together. You can hear the room. You can, uh, and that's an engineering standpoint. But I mean, anybody you can listen to it and go, there are actual four dudes in a room playing.
Yep.
And for me, that's amazing. Like that's one of the greatest things to be able to hear that. Like a lot of people think music is just music, and it's not. They forget the humanity part of it.
Yep. I totally blame them damn baby boomers. They figured out some tricks for, making all this
ABBA.
stuff sound really good, and,
I
then
blame ABBA.
yeah, well, that's a little bit later, but yeah, they're to blame too. Yeah, you hear
Damn you,
that?
ABBA.
Yeah.
No, you're right though. I mean, well, part of it is the recording, but I mean, music industry is to blame.
I don't
too.
think it's the recording that really is the problem. I think it's just that we need to be more aware of what music was and what it can be again, and
No.
stop letting the industry and the recording technology sort of stuff getting in the way of why we liked music as a species to begin with. Because, we're missing out.
I'm going to play devil's advocate on the recording thing because this is not coming from me, but I read somewhere in some article, and it was along the same lines. And the one guy said that he could play back. The reason he loved recording so much was he could play back the Beatles track and still be able to make out with his girlfriend and continue to relive that same experience. If there was no recording, well, you'd have to do it yourself, which wouldn't necessarily be a bad idea, provided you can still sing. But I guess, yeah, there are cases for keeping recording technology alive, I suppose. Did I get off topic?
Well, we're good. Yeah, I personally definitely don't have a problem with recording itself. I think it's great. Obviously, I do it all the time. But I think it's just important to remember why we got into this stuff collectively as a species to begin with, because sometimes economies and commercialism and technology and all that can get in the way of the real reasons why we like the things that we like as people. But I was bringing this up because I'm getting ready to start mixing and mastering that the recording session we did a couple weeks back with the little band that we sort of ad hoc put together with our friend from Albuquerque. We call ourselves the Electric Kodama Band. And I was going to bring up this because I'm pretty sure you'd be interested in talking about it. What I'm thinking of doing for this particular, basically it's single, there's 2 songs. I'm thinking I'm going to get it cut on vinyl, actually.
Nice. Good plan.
So, have you done much of that? You've been in the industry for maybe long enough to have been involved with an actual vinyl release, right?
No, I haven't done that. Actually, tell you, I haven't done an actual vinyl release that I've sent off to get pressed. However, I do know a few things about it. I know that CD mastering, when we're talking about studio CD mastering, that the loudness war thing that's got to be 0.2, you know what I mean, below 0, kind of like brick wall limiting, you cannot do on a record. You have to look up what the headroom is of a record. One of the best things that I've heard from some of the people that have gotten stuff pressed, they've actually ran it off 2-tape, quarter-inch. These guys will accept quarter-inch masters because it's analog. You're working with 0 VU as nominal operating level, and provided all the tones match up, you're gonna be you can't mix you almost need to rethink your mix and mastering. Definitely rethink your mastering for vinyl press, and you almost need to rethink your mix for a vinyl press, or at least what the mix is going to, because a lot of like what the levels are going to the sort of 2-track recorder. One thing, a lot of like transients and really big low end information doesn't always translate well on a record pressing.
Yeah.
So you need to keep that in mind when you're doing the mix.
Because a record needle is physically, thrashing
It's going to
around.
physically,
So
it'll
if you've got
physically
like,
bump out of the grooves.
if you got a sine bass line thing going on and you pan that hard to one channel or the other, you're gonna completely make it so that the cutting machine can't do that and the rest of the material, because the only thing it's going to be doing is that wave. You have to keep it centered. Your bass has to be centered, and like you said, transients, really fast transients.
And I mean, the playback medium may not even be able to reproduce the bass, not so much the frequencies, but the level that the bass is being mixed at.
Right. I know, a lot of dubstep producers are using dub plates, acetate plates. Is basically aluminum disc with a coating of acetate, and they'll cut on a 10 or 12 inch, but they'll make the spiral so that there's enough room in between the tracks so that they can actually physically get those huge bass movements on that needle and not run the tracks over the ones next to each other.
Well, and see, that's the thing, is when you're sequencing a record, and when I say record, I'm talking about like a album, like whether it's a CD or a tape or an actual vinyl. You need to keep that in mind, right? Like when I used to do cassette sides when I was doing a CD master. So say I had 14 songs on a record production, like an album. And so I had songs 1 through 14 in the CD lineup. In order to make the cassette running master, I'd have to make a CD master with a 2-minute break between basically 6 songs, 2 minutes, 6 songs. But I'd have to time it out so that there was no time or less time in between. Like when side A ends, you need to have side A longer than side B, right? Because if you have side B longer, you're going to end up with a whole bunch of dead air, or you might actually cut off the other side. So we'd have to sit there and figure out, move tracks around, and take track 9 and bring it up to track 1, and keep moving stuff around until you got like the least amount of difference between the running time for side A and side B. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Yeah, and it was a whole big problem because the bugger of doing calculating with a calculator is it doesn't do math that ends 60. It does math that ends at 100. So you'd have to do that all in your head. You know what I mean? So this is no fun for an audio geek who got into doing audio so he wouldn't have to touch a calculator. But that being said, it's the same as doing a record production, right? You're gonna do 5 songs on side A and 5 songs on or 3 songs on side B. Well, you need to make sure that the grooves line up. You can't have dead air, for 8 minutes on the second side of the album, expect pressed and mastered properly on that kind of stuff. You want to fill up the most available space you have on the 78, and that might mean going, okay, well, the original CD lineup is song 1, 2, 3, and 4, but if I move song 4 to side B and I move song 7 to side A, it doesn't work with the flow of the album, but it makes it so that I can economically press everything into the record. Because the last thing you want is to get all the songs on side A and then run out of space on side B, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So speaking to that, I don't know if there's any actual LP. I'm sure there's LP manufacturers in the States, but as far as I know, in Canada, from what I gather, there's one guy, which doesn't help the whole "do you know John from Toronto" thing. But basically, from what I've heard, there's one guy that presses LPs in Canada. He's somewhere near Toronto. He's got an old LP pressing machine. Although there may be other manufacturing places, I've heard that there's this guy that does know what he's doing. And there's a label in Winnipeg called War on Music, and I think it's waronmusic.ca or .com, but they do vinyl pressings, and they're the guys who are sort of the middleman, plus they're a record label too. So if you're an independent band, you can get stuff done with them and go on their label, or just do it independently, that kind of thing. So you'd have to do a Google search, but yeah.
Thankfully, vinyl is pretty alive and well here in the United States, and we have quite a few record manufacturers left in operation. But I'm not sure if I'm actually going to press the vinyl, or if I'm going to have maybe them just cut me some dub plates. I don't know. It's hard, because it's basically going to end up, I'm going to play one until it degrades, and then the rest are going to go in frames, and they're going to go to the band members. Because, vinyl's awesome, but it looks better on a wall. If I want to listen to it, I'll just throw on the music file on the computer, I think.
Well, from what I gathered, too, the minimum pressing on an LP is pretty expensive.
Yeah, you'd have to drop it anywhere from $500 to $1,000 to get a minimum run. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the minimum run is like a 1,500 albums. What you do as a secondary plan is when you create. This is maybe a little dollar store, but you've seen the CDs that look like records.
Oh yeah, sure.
Or, for that matter, you could even get a record and just Photoshop the size of the middle of this disc. There's a good trivia question. What's the name of the middle of the record called? The part without the audio information. I'm just saying you can easily Photoshop and create. To get an old record from a, Salvation Army or something, create the sticker for the middle of it, make a Photoshop size album cover, press that into a frame, and you could do it without actually having to press all the records, right?
Oh yeah, well I'm handy, so I could probably build a cutting lathe. I'm just that kind of guy,
Yeah. You know what I mean, though. Like, I mean, you could do it, like, if you wanted to, or like I said, even you can get those CDs that look like records too. But there is something nice about actually having it in your hand. I guess it really comes down to, from what I gather, I mean, obviously CD sales have declined over the last few years. In the last year, CD sales have declined, MP3 sales have gone up, and LP sales have gone up. That's not to say that LPs are competing with MP3s. It's just that LPs are having a resurgence, whereas people aren't buying CDs as much anymore. The question is, and this is the record label me talking, can you make your money back? Is basically the question.
I'd say if you've got a big enough following of vinyl people that like your band, then yeah, I guess they'll buy it up. Am I going to make any? No, I'm going to spend a lot of money to have this done.
Just to be able to say it, yeah. It's like buying a Roomba, really. You want to buy it just because it's a cool, vacuum that does it all for you. Whether it was the best plan in the world, I don't know, but it's worth the extra $150 just to watch it do it itself, right?
Yeah. Anyway, I love old media, and I think it'd be really cool to say that I've got a published single on vinyl. I think that'd be great, because it's basically impossible for somebody our age to have that be true. And unless you're like producing electronic dance music or something like that, then the chances are much higher. But yeah, I think it'd be cool.
No, it's totally cool. I was going to say, if anybody wants to go and check on this, if they're an audiophile, Pearl Jam released Vitology on cassette, CD, and LP. They could confirm whether it's the same lineup throughout all of them, and whether there's a sound quality difference between the CD, because this is before Brickwall Limiting, and the LP.
There you go. Homework assignment.
That's a homework assignment right there. And that's one of the bigger selling LPs in the last 30 years, partially because it was released on LP right away. It wasn't one of these afterthought type of situations. I think it was, $42 Canadian when it came out, which is ridiculous. Yeah. What else I was gonna mention something about my band. We're actually going to probably put out one of the demos or albums that we're working on cassette just for giggles. Because I have a cassette duplicator at work that does 11 cassettes at a time. B, because I know how to do it. And, lots of people still have older cars still kicking around with cassette decks in them. So just nice. If they've only got one cassette deck in their car, or, one cassette, take ours.
Yeah. Maybe next time we can talk about how the 4 tracks on a cassette work. That's always an interesting, sort of mind-blowing thing the first time it's explained to you. But we're out of time for this week.
Cool. Cheers. Have a good night.
You guys can find this show every Friday, patchbay.tv. There's an RSS feed link there for your iTunes or phone, or you can just push play on the page. It's really easy. We'll see you guys next week.